Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
This is the Black Gold Banneret Podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
And we welcome you to this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Eric Lopez. Jeff is off. He is on vacation. Boy, he picked a bad week to be off because we got a busy show coming up. Breaking news on Wednesday night, UCF and Florida playing on the field. We'll explain that. Later in the show, we'll break down 3 UCF baseball players getting drafted in the Major League Baseball draft. Bryson Turner will join us for that. Plus, we'll take your questions on Twitter as well, including there's a catcher in softball that's moving on. So we'll discuss all of that. Of course, you can follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com on the website, UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Follow us, like us on Facebook. Subscribe to us on our YouTube page as well at Black and Gold Banneret. I'm joined by Andrew Glukov for this opening segment of the show because of this big breaking news, Drew. And that's, of course, according to Mike Bianchi of the Orlando Sentinel on late Wednesday night, is reporting that UCF and Florida are on the verge of an agreement for a 3-game series in football starting in 2024 in Gainesville, then 2030 at UCF on campus at the Bounce House, and then 2033 at Gainesville. It's a 2-for-1. Technically, of course, there's so many questions from a financial standpoint we don't know, from a ticket distribution, and things like that. Your reaction, Drew? Obviously, this has been a hot topic since this came out on Wednesday night. A lot of mixed bag of a reaction. Obviously, you have the detractors that are against the quote-unquote 2-for-1. Some are complaining about the length of how long the games are dragged out and things like that. What was your reaction when you saw this news?
It's about time. It's about time. Let's take a step back for a second. When Danny White came out and said, we're not taking 2-for-1s, basically you created a picket line and no one was crossing. And so, Terry Mohajir comes in and flat out said, the schedule's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Most schools are looking into the next decade. UCF is looking, next year to try to fill. That's a football disaster. I don't think people realize how bad UCF's schedule situation really is. There's a lot of complaints about the scheduling being the way it is. And it's because there's no choice. If you go really to any, many of the big schools, they're already scheduling into the 2030s because they don't have room. They're wheeling and dealing. UCF had an opportunity a couple years ago to put a series together. Never really got anywhere, but they had an opportunity to do it. They chose not to. It wasn't the direction that the administration wanted to go. Had they done it, they would have probably got more favorable times compared to what they have today. But Terry Mohajir flat out said, you're going to like some of them, you're not going to like some of them. But I think this is huge for UCF. Florida has crossed the line, and this creates a lot of positive energy as far as UCF come out and saying, "Hey, we're willing to make a deal to play. Let's play." I think this is great for UCF.
I agree. Look, here's the bottom line. You mentioned it, and you wrote about this on Black and Gold Banneret. There's a lot of holes on this schedule, and you still have
terrible.
And you got to go ahead, go break it down for us.
Let's break it down. So obviously UCF's 21 and 22 schedules are complete. The 2022 schedule was recently completed with the addition of a home and home with Florida Atlantic, away in 2022, home in 2025. UCF has 2 slots in 2023, 2024, and 2025. They have no games scheduled for 2026, and they have 3 spots for 2027. That's it. That's all they have on their schedule. Let's compare to Florida. Florida's schedule is full in 21, 22, 23, 25, 26, and 31. There's 1 slot available in 2024. That's when that first game against UCF is due to be scheduled. They have 2 spots open in 2027, 1 in 2028, but they already have 2 road games, so they're getting a home game that one. 2 in 29, 2 in 30, 1 in 32, and then they have nothing else but Florida State scheduled from 2033 and on. So comparatively speaking, UCF's schedule is in horrible shape compared to Florida's, which are basically outside of 1 game that UCF's filling in is full until 2027. I mean, when Terry Mohajir commented about the scheduling, he said when he was at Arkansas State, they were looking at towards 2030 and UCF was looking at 2022. It just shows the state of the program when it comes from a scheduling standpoint. That is a direct result of scheduling philosophy that was on the previous administration. It was a gamble. It didn't work. It's time to change tactics. And you know what? By showing that UCS willing to play ball, there is a better chance of actually landing home and homes because now a team has crossed the picket line. They don't have to be the first anymore. Florida's, if this goes through, Florida's that first team, the monkeys off the back, and we can move forward and we can actually, be proactive and build these schedules as opposed to being in constant damage control. Some people are happy being perpetual series with Florida Atlantic. I see a problem with that. Here's the truth. Recruits also care about the schedule. If you have nothing but patsies on your schedule, you have a less chance of landing a recruit in a vacuum versus, a school down the road that's like, hey, we're playing, X elite team and, next year or in 2 years, come here and get a shot at. And the other thing is, we're so locked in on the CFP. If you want to be the best, beat the best. What's the problem with playing against a good program in the regular season, beating them, and then parlaying that into the CFP? Because the other thing is, the rankings are still going to be done by the CFP committee. If insert Sun Belt Conference name here goes undefeated with an elite win, and UCF goes undefeated in the American with trash wins, you may have a rankings problem. It's not a guarantee that UCF is going to be the team, even if they lose a game somewhere, and still
that's the thing.
conference.
You want to give yourself as many opportunities to get into the playoff. You don't, if you play a tough schedule, you win those games. That's going to be a chip on your shoulder, in your favor. I've been a proponent of saying that had Houston taken care of business in conference in 2016, they would have been in the playoff over Washington because they would have had a win over Oklahoma, who won the Big 12 that year, and Louisville. That matters. I do think that would help your resume. But you make a great point. More important than that, the recruiting aspect of it. Every kid wants to play in big games. And I'm sorry, but playing UConn is not a big game. Playing Bethune-Cookman, not a big game. FAU, not a big game. You got to play a marquee game every year. And you just illustrated they're going to have a hard time trying to get a marquee home game here in the next 5-6 years. That's going to be tough. And you're probably going to have to go on the road for a marquee game. That hurts recruiting. You want your recruits to know that, hey, if I come to UCF, I get to play the best. I get to play Florida. I get to play anybody. We'll have a legitimate chance to compete for the national title and not try to talk our way into one.
Exactly. You want to be the best, beat the best. We're competing against other, other podcasts and other media things. So we try to do something special, something good. We want to be the best. No different than on the field. You have to do something unique, something special. Yeah. UCF has an outstanding stadium, a great atmosphere. But if you're playing against, UConn or Florida Atlantic or Liberty, that doesn't create national excitement. It really doesn't. And you want to also tip the scale in your in-state recruiting. Playing Florida is a big deal, especially if you win. Those in-state recruits want to see that. They want to be on the field for that. And to be able to start getting in-state series in place is just huge. I mean,
and there's there's nothing to lose.
There's
all the pressure's on Florida. That's what's so hilarious about this.
Yes. The pressure is on Florida because if Florida wins, they were supposed to win. UCF is still, the G5, the other guy, the underdog. However, if UCF wins, it causes disruption. Night fans love the concept of UCF being a disruptor. The best way to disrupt is to win on the field. So get on the field and go win. And the only way to do that is to play ball with them. And you have to negotiate. There's give, there's take. And right now, UCF is not negotiating from a position of strength. Their future schedule is so bad. They made the comment about the parking lot, playing in the parking lot. Well, it's going to have to be their parking lot more often than not right now until UCF can balance their schedule out in the future. Here's the thing. UCF has to budget for 6 home games. That's how it normally works, unless you're one of the top teams. So the fact that Danny White wanted to budget on 7 was absolutely insane and unsustainable. It was unsustainable and was not going to work. Here's the thing. You can make it work. You have an FCS opponent on years that you deal with the extra game from a 2-1, and you can have home and home series against lower P5s and other G5 schools. You can make 6 games work. Hey, everyone else does it. Why can't UCF? Well, right. UCF is no different than any other school out there. There's no reason why they can't put together a 6-game schedule. The big difference is unfortunately, we have a pecking order in the FBS, and until it changes, it's a case of
it's the way it works.
It's the way it works. Either
does anybody regret
or you don't.
Anybody regret taking the one game at Alabama in 2000? I mean, they won that game. That's where
there was a 1 game in 2012 against Ohio State, which was replacing another 1 game against Pitt that got nixed. There was. And by the way, Ohio State actually canceled Cincinnati on that one. 2016 against Michigan, it was a one-off. Sometimes one-offs are not necessarily a bad thing. It helps balance the schedule sometimes.
And it gets casual fans interested. I think a lot of people that are upset and think that those might be the diehards, and that's fine. But you're already in. We're not trying to get you to buy in. You got to get casual. I've had people text me that don't really care about UCF football. They're excited about this matchup as a casual person. And I think we forget that as sports fans here, Drew. When a part of scheduling these games is you draw casual people. You're going to get new fans because you're playing in these games because there's eyeballs. I've said this story, and I said this earlier with Bryson when we did the Q&A. I became a UCF fan because I heard of Dante Culpepper. You know how I heard about Dante Culpepper? Because they were playing the Nebraska and leading them at the half. It wasn't because they were playing Idaho State at home at the Citrus Bowl. You know what I mean? That matters. And I think it helps you grow. And you want to play the best teams. Why are you ducking? Why all this yap that you're this great? What are you afraid of?
And I think that comes to the fact that they bought so much into a philosophy that I understand where they're coming from. They want equality in the FBS. Well, guess what? There has never been, and there probably never really will be, a level of equality because this isn't a league like the NFL that has a governing structure that controls everything. These are actually 10 independently run conferences.
Correct.
That have banded together to create a system called the CFP to determine who's the best team among them. But they are still independently run conferences. They all have different rules, and they allow each school to independently schedule 3 or 4 games on their own against other schools from independently run conferences. If you don't like it, don't be a college fan. This is how it works on every level,
always
in every sport.
And And here's the other aspect of it. If you want to make the college football playoff, if you believe it expands to 12, 8, 12, whatever, you got to test yourself. You're not going to prove yourself anything by playing Bethunes and Tulsas and Connecticut's. And who did you beat? You play Florida. That's going to help you one way or the other. It helps you get prepared. It helps your resume. It helps grab interest. And if you lose, that's a tough break and you lose. And I know some people are saying, well, that's going to kick you out of the playoff because they'll pick, you'll lose to the team that's undefeated in the G5. And that's been one thing I've said, Drew. I hope that the committee, when they do expand the playoff, reward teams that play a tough schedule and don't just reward a team that goes undefeated.
Well, that's what they've done in the past.
Right. Well, some would think no, but I agree I think for the most part they've done that where you reward a team. For example, Cincinnati got in over a Coastal Carolina. Why? Because they played a tougher league and they got the benefit of the doubt, tougher schedule, winning at UCF at the end, beating Tulsa in the championship game that was ranked. That won them over, kept them in the top 10 in that regard. It doesn't hurt you. I personally think the days of games against the FCS are coming to an end because I think it'll be interesting to me if the committee starts punishing teams that play FCS games as part of the schedule. I don't know if they will, but I think those are some of the questions if they expand. I'm talking about if they expand down the road. And I think that's important to bring up, Drew, because I think a lot of the scheduling motivation you're seeing here by a lot of teams is, oh, crap, we better make sure we got our schedule in ducks in order by the time this playoff expands.
Oh, absolutely. And you're actually, if you look at Florida's schedule, you're seeing little bits and pieces of it actually start to swing that way. Because, we've always talked about, it's always been talked about how the SEC has their November tune-up game against an FCS opponent. Well, they have that in 2021. Well, it starts dialing back after that.
Yep.
In 2022, it's in October. In 2025, it's in October. In 26, 23, and 22, or in 23, 24, and 26, they're in September. And right now, they have no other FCS games on there. Now, they may ultimately put one on there, but you're starting to see a trend of them moving away from the late season because it's creating a negative perception versus trying to
absolutely
elevate themselves. Because, it's getting to the point where, you have a 1 or 2 loss SEC team versus, a 1-loss Big Ten team, and they're jockeying for position of that 5 through 8, spot.
Agreed.
It's something's got to give,
I agree.
So, they always said, in football, if you're going to lose early because you have the rest of the season to make up for it. Well, if you're going to play bad teams, play them early because then you have the rest of the season to make up for it.
Now, let me ask you this from an economic standpoint, because obviously some of the focus is, well, what happens if Florida, buys them out and with that 2030 game, they never come here? They're going to die. My response to that is, cool. That means UCF gets a check out of that. There is a financial, either way, UCF's going to be protected here financially. Either they're going to play the Florida games and you're going to have a packed house, you're going to make a lot of money, or they buy you out and you're not going to make money because they buy you out. There's going to be clauses, I would assume, in this contract. The other thing I wonder.
Well, they're going to buy out of 2 games at that point because You're not going to buy out of the 2030 game and keep the 2030.
Agreed. So you're going to make good money. You're going to make good money out of that.
So I don't see Florida doing it. Plus,
I agree. I don't think they will.
PR hit would be catastrophic because then you actually have a tangible tangible story of Florida is afraid to play UCF in their house. They bought out of the game.
And I will say, I think Scott Strickland is more willing to play people. To his credit, he's opened up. They're playing more non-conference. I think there's a business side of this. For Florida, I think they know they can't draw 100,000 people if they're playing Eastern Washingtons of the world, right? Like, they got to play somebody that fans get excited. I think the days of, hey, I'm going to go see my team play the garbage team because I'm this, are over. I don't think people are just going to, dive in, especially in this post, heck, we're still in a pandemic deal. I'm curious from your standpoint. Do you think there's a part of UCF that home game in 2033, they're kind of hoping that by then their football stadium is a little bit more expanded? Could you buy into that conspiracy theory that maybe, and part of it is, hey, you had no choices, but could UCF be thinking, there's always been some chatter, quiet chatter, about expanding the stadium, more seats. Could that be in play for that 2033 game, let's say?
Well, I mean, it would be 2030. 2033.
You think they could do something sooner than that? Okay, so you're being more optimistic.
2033, okay. The game would be in Gainesville, so it wouldn't matter.
Okay, you're right, 2030, right.
So, let's talk about that 2030 game.
Yeah.
From a construction standpoint, absolutely. From a money standpoint, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. UCF was very lucky to end up in the black this year. It took the buyouts of Josh Heupel and Danny White to do so. UCF was facing a loss for the year, and they would have had a loss if nothing changed. The fact that they ended up in the black in this pandemic year was just absolutely amazing. Thank your lucky stars, because many schools have not been so fortunate. To expand the stadium is going to be expensive. UCF has a lot of maintenance they have to do on what's currently there. It's been around since 2007, and it's taken a lot of abuse. There's been lawsuits about the quality of the steel that was used, and UCF's had to put money in to make sure it stays up and stays safe. So do I think by 2030 there could be an expansion? Yeah, I do, but you're going to need to maintain a high level of demand and buzz to be able to justify it. And this is how you do it. You put games like this on the schedule. And again, a lot of fans are complaining about how late this game is. Well, that's because that's what's available. So, as Terry Mohajer said, you're going to find series you don't like, and we're going to find series that UCF has to work from a position of weakness to get things done to catch back up to the national average.
I agree, and I appreciate you correcting me. I was getting it confused. Right, the home game's at 2030. The game in Gainesville is 2033. I agree with you. I don't see Florida buying out of two games.
I don't see Florida buying out of one. There's no benefit.
Right. There isn't, and I think they're willing to play, and I think they want to hit up all the markets. So I think it's a win. And again, attendance. I think attendance is a factor here. I think we're taking it for granted in this post-COVID deal. They want to make sure they get people back in the stadium. They want to make sure they get packed houses. That Florida stadium is what, nearly 100,000 or 90+ thousand. They're not going to draw that for garbage. And I think they realize that. They're not drawing that for, Bethune and or whatever. They want to attract games. And UCF will draw. UCF will bring their fans.
And it's fun. They're
what a crazy concept.
Yeah, they're looking for the fun factor too.
But why have fun? Let's just go beat up on UConn and then brag that we're number one.
And Florida has made a concerted effort to play state schools. They host Florida Atlantic this year. They travel to South Florida, and then they play home versus USF 2 other games. That's why I have full faith that Florida would see the contract through. They're playing at USF in the first game of the series, and that's partially because it works out with it being the only road game of their schedule, and they can keep that 7-game home schedule. We want to, we've always talked about wanting to see, more regional games. They're cheaper. It's good for the local economy. It's good for the school's economy. This is no different. Florida Atlantic, USF, Miami. They play Florida A&M. They have Sanford, which is and McNeese State. They're southeastern schools. They're coming.
Well, I think once if this comes out and it's announced, I mean, this will open floodgates, right? Like all of a sudden now there's pressure on Florida State's like, why aren't you doing that with UCF? If you're Miami, why aren't you doing that with UCF? And I think it opens up a lot of doors that right now are closed. And again, it's easy to say, well, that's not fair. We should hold on to our formula. Who are you playing right now? Who are you going to play for the next 5 years that's going to be worth a darn? Like, it's nobody. You're going to be dusting off. And this idea that, we're going to wait until somebody drops a game and things like that, that's insane. I'm sorry. Danny White was a great AD, did a lot of great things, but he dropped the ball on this, clearly. He's put UCF in a bad position from a scheduling standpoint in the number one sport where you make revenue.
It's true. He made a gamble. What are you going to do? You try something. It didn't
He
work.
let his emotions get the best of him. This goes back to 2017. He got the emotions the best of him. No, this is not right. We should be in the playoff. We're not going to just cave into 2 for 1. We're going to do home and homes. And you know what everybody else in the sport told him? Okay, good luck.
Yeah, they basically laughed at him.
Yeah.
And he got blacklisted. Well, let me phrase that. UCF got blacklisted. I mean,
some would argue by him going to Tennessee is like being blacklisted, but that's all the story.
Well, that's not a hearing. But it's true. He damaged the school's ability to schedule games because he dug his heels in so much. No one wanted to be that first team that really, that first elite team to jump over. I mean, Miami talked about, doing a 2 for 1. Originally it was a home and home, and then I believe Florida Citrus Sports kind of got in their ear and it kind of went sideways. But the truth is, Miami may not be the great program it once was, but it still has a historical cachet that a UCF doesn't have, and they're still able to get 2 for 1s with or even just one-shot games against smaller schools. You look at Florida State's future schedule, and you go from 2025 and on, there's at least 2 spots available. Well, 2026, there's only 1 spot, but 2025 on with 26 being an exception, there's at least 2 spots available. The next 4 seasons, 21 through 24, are all taken up. They're all full. So, I mean, UCF can work to schedule these, but 2023, 2024, that's a rough situation. Most schools don't have spaces available. I mean, Miami does. Maybe Miami would agree to something to help each other out. They can schedule an FCS school and balance things out, but they also could throw a bone and work with UCF. Who knows?
It's a tough job. And again, you want to play marquee games. You want to be look. I will ask you this question. One of our listeners asked, and me and Bryson answer this question later in the show. But which games are you looking forward to the most this year? What pops into your head, Drew? What games in this year's schedule pops into that you're the most looking forward to?
Is this home, road, or all
of it? All the above. All of it. Whatever. Yeah.
Boise State.
Yep. Marquee. Yep. What? That's 2 marquee games, right? Major programs. One on the road, the other one at home, part of a home and home. Okay.
They're both part of home and homes.
Yeah. Right. But marquee game.
Boise State 21 and 23.
Yeah.
Louisville 21 and 22.
Big brand, brand's names there. Louisville, the ACC program. Obviously, that will be the 8 years to 8 years ago. UCF played Louisville in that classic game in Louisville. Boise's obviously the G5 program that people have compared to over the last 2 decades.
Right. And the other two games are Memphis and
conference games. Correct. Conference games.
Cincinnati. Conference
most
games.
Important. But you notice you didn't bring up Bethune. You didn't bring up UConn. You know what I mean? Like, you're no different than every fan. Like, we always look forward to the marquee. Last year, if we did this exercise last year, what was the game that people were talking about a year ago this time? It was North Carolina. At the time, they were the schedule for the opener. And Georgia Tech. That's the games they were looking at. Hello? What am I missing here? That's the games people look forward to. I'm sorry. That's reality. And you have to give your fans, and I think you have to give your players that you're recruiting and the players you currently have those type of games. Otherwise, they're not going to come to your school. They're not going to commit to your school, and the recruiting drops off, and fans will stop coming to games because you can't go undefeated forever. And once you lose a game or two, people are going to be, why do I want to go see them play Bethune when I can watch that at home? Why do I bother with that?
You find me someone who's excited about UCF versus Liberty, and I'll find you a liar. Because there's nothing exciting about that game.
Correct. Nobody cares. This is going to bring television into it. The national media will be more interested in it. It's a brand name. Look, I'm the softball play-by-play guy, Drew. What was the game this past year that people have talked about the most this year in softball?
It's the Florida game.
Yeah. Joe.
Games.
Why? Why was that? Because it's a big brand. It's Florida. It's a top 5 team.
And they won.
And the reason why that's important, because you don't have to be a softball fan to be into that, right? Like people that are not softball fans were into that because it's Florida, it's UCF. It just does. I think that's missing from baseball. It's not their fault. It's not Greg's fault. I blame Florida for this because he's willing to play everybody. But Florida's not on the UCF schedule because Florida doesn't want to play them. And that hurts the schedule a little bit. Nobody was, from that standpoint, that hurts UCF. But I agree with Greg in that stance. That's a more of a personal thing there. But that matters. That brand matters. And
look at basketball. What's the basketball game you can think of last year that
Florida State?
Boom. You talk about these in-state games against, those big schools. They're playing Florida State again next year in basketball.
Yep.
And that was one of the hyped games. You have to be willing to play ball. And in other sports, maybe not baseball right now, just because you were saying about Florida, but basketball, softball, tennis, all these other sports, the big schools are willing to play on a more level playing field. Football operates different. It operates on a different plane of existence compared to the others. And you have to be willing to play by the rules of those who have the strength.
Yeah.
And the ones in the strength are the ones that don't have to fill your schedule in 2 years. They're the ones that have the strength.
By the way, in Greg's defense, what he did to replace, now this year is COVID, so he was handcuffed, but he has Florida State on the schedule. He had Ole Miss this year on the schedule, 3-game series. They were number 1 ranked in the country. That's the games that people talked about the most this year in baseball. Nobody cared about UCF Tulane in New Orleans during the season. Nobody cared about a UCF Jacksonville series. At least not the casual fan. The diehards are always in. We're in.
This isn't about diehards, though.
It's not, and I think some of the diehard fans don't understand that, because I think I would say a good strong percentage of the fans that are complaining about this Florida game are the diehards that are going to go to Bethune. They're going to go watch and play FAMU. They're going to get excited about it, and that's fine, great, but that's not the majority. Where is that fringe fan, the casual fan that can't go to every game, that doesn't watch every game? Those matter because that puts you over the top. And I think, look, there's a reason why the Peach Bowl, people cared more about the Auburn game in 2017 than they did, say, the SMU game that year. Why? It's a big game. That's where more people are tuned in. The casual fans are tuned in. This is a big deal. And I'm sorry that some of them are disappointed. I like playing the best. If you're going to be one of the best teams, if you're going to talk about it and recruit like it, play them. You lose, you weren't meant to play. You weren't meant to be as good as you thought you were going to be. That's just the end of the world there.
Yeah, but, I mean, I'll be honest. I am not particularly interested in being the bottom seed in the CFP just to get trucked because I really wasn't the best team.
Right.
You put yourself on a national stage and then get embarrassed. That doesn't help your program. Just being there, that doesn't help your program, especially the way this new playoff system is supposed to be designed. You think the NFC East did themselves any justice with a team going 6-10? I mean, it was embarrassing.
Right.
But that's the rules. I know you have strong feelings about that, but that's those are the rules in which you play. So you know what? Play against a good team, win, lose, find out what went wrong.
By the way,
you know what? Then you get ready for a conference schedule.
Yep.
You know what? You play against good teams and they help you get better.
And look at Boise State the last 2 decades. They're still living off their big wins against the Virginia Techs and the Oregons. They've won in the regular. Georgia, they beat Georgia and Atlanta. You could argue that Boise State the last few years haven't been to the Boise standards. But because they've built all this equity with the success of the marquee wins they've had because they've scheduled teams, They get the benefit of the doubt from people. And I think the same would be applied to UCF moving forward, is they'll get benefit of the doubt by playing these games. And people will stop knocking them. UCF had a problem with 2017. Oh, you're getting 2 or 2. You're not fair. You're this or that. You know why you got knocked and you weren't in the playoff? Because playing Maryland doesn't do squat for you in this system. It doesn't. And you know what? You should have kept Texas in that schedule. Obviously, Scott Frost, they got away from that game. Nobody knew they were going to go undefeated that year. So he just wanted to improve the team. But if you play Texas, that gets more eyeballs. That gets you more respect. I'm sorry. That's the way it works. You don't have to like it, but that's the way the system is. If you don't like it, then don't follow it.
Right, exactly. And I want to re-point out something that you mentioned. UCF was the one who got out of that Texas game.
Yes.
Scott Frost decided, we're not going to play you. That was completely on the UCF side. And
they replaced it with, I forget who they replaced. They basically was given the choices, give up the Maryland game or the Texas game, and he gave up the Texas game, the way I was told about that. And you know what? He would have been better off keeping the Texas game. That year, that Texas team wasn't that great, but they would have gotten more bang for their buck beating a Texas than they would have beating a Maryland. And that's how this sport works.
That would have gone without saying outside of the year that Maryland just ripped it apart in the ACC. Maryland is not a blue blood program like a Texas is. I mean, if you get a chance to play against a team with that kind of reputation, you play against the team with the top reputation because you use that for your resume builder. It just that kind of blows my mind. But you talk about, playing, Boise kind of stepping back. I think there's more to it. We talk about, television contracts. Well, the Mountain West television contract is nothing short of awful.
Yep.
It's absolutely horrendous. Well, UCF has got the benefit of the Americans television package, which, despite people complaining about, actually gives good exposure. You bring in a good team, Florida, an Auburn, a Georgia, just throw random, teams that have reputation. Well, guess what? ESPN is contractually obligated to have so many games on ABC that are hosted by AAC.
And teams. Don't think TV doesn't play a role in this, by the way.
TV plays a major role.
I bet you TV played a nice role in this. Yep.
Guarantee you that UCF Florida game, unless one of the teams falls completely on their face and has the season of, to forget, is going to be on a major network. They're going to be on ESPN2, probably at the lowest.
Yeah, as long as both
at the lowest.
At the lowest, and if both programs take care of business, that'll be a big game.
I can't see.
TV likes this. TV likes this. Recruits like this.
They love this. I don't think we can overstate this.
So let me just paraphrase, because a lot of, for all you naysayers, recruits like this, TV likes this, administrators like this because it's money and it's tickets. Coaches like this because it's big games, especially if you're Gus. They've targeted that. And then the casual fan likes this. Who the heck is upset again? Oh, it's the selfish It's the selfish fan that's, I want to go 12-0. I don't think it's fair.
And then get throttled in the first round because you never actually tested your team.
Right, because guess what? If this playoff that everybody's like Jeff loves so much, if it goes to 12, you're probably going to have to play 3 or 4 of these Florida teams in a row. So you might as well get used to be
Florida teams, but you're playing. If you don't have a bye, you have a 17 game season. That's an NFL season. That's rough. So you know what?
Right.
I wouldn't try just to get a seat at the table. I would try to get the head seat at the table. But
it helps.
I'm not in charge.
Plus, if you don't get that quote, and I don't know, who knows what the rules will be for that playoff, but let's say you don't get that highest ranked group of 5 title, you could still be in the mix for an at-large by playing good games.
Well, it's not even the automatic G5 spot. That would probably go, that based on all indications, that would go away. You could still put together a good season. And if your metrics are better than, say, the Pac-12, Oregon goes 10-2 or 9-3, and then wins the Pac-12 championship, an 11-1 UCF that lost to Florida, but ran the table in the American would still be a very high chance of getting in. And part of why the Pac-12, even though they've been down, still has reputation over the American. It goes back to their strength of schedule metrics.
It's a great point. If you hope that everybody in the league, like South Florida's, Tulsa plays Oklahoma State basically every year. If everybody in the league plays a tough schedule, that's going to benefit you. You've seen that with baseball and softball. That's why they're top 5 leagues in those sports, because they play out of conference a tough schedule. And if you do that in the American, you're going to get more respect. You pass the Pac-12s of the world, and you get yourself in the mix, not only to be in the playoffs, but to maybe have multiple bids. You can get the possible seeds out of it. But more importantly than all that, make more money, which is more money.
And not only on top of that, but you look at it from a cascading standpoint. You have an awesome run, where the American beats good out of conference teams, and you do it more than once. Well, now you're building brand value.
Yes.
And we talk about brand value as the biggest thing now in the conference, alignment discussion. It's not about TV markets. People still rely on that. Well, guess what? TV markets is no longer a strong metric.
No.
Thanks to cord cutting, it really isn't.
No.
In fact, it's not. It shouldn't even be the primary driver of a conversation. It's brand value. How do you build brand value? Aside from getting the casual fan, from beating those big games that get onto ABC and are the primetime game of the week, it's also just getting on the field. You may not win the game, but hey, these guys are scrappy. I like what the product they bring. You know what? I'm gonna quietly root for these guys as like my second or third team. That's how you build it. You got to look at it from a long-term perspective. This isn't a vacuum. You do well in one season, you parlay it into the next season, you parlay it into the next season, and so on and so on. And that's how you build a strong program. You don't have a flash in the pan moment. 2017 was great, but 2018 made it even better. You have to build one from the other. That's what we didn't see from 2013 to 2014. 2013 had a great run. 2014, well, yeah, they won a conference championship. That's because the American was a kind of a weak conference that year, and no one really wanted it. But that's you got to stack one on the other, and you can't do it if you never get on the field.
Play those games, man. It's fun. They're fun games. That's what makes memories. And man, life is short. So, don't worry about it. Let them play. If we're good enough, we'll win those games. And if you're not good enough, you weren't meant to. You didn't deserve any of the other stuff behind that. So
I think we can summarize this really, really easily for you and I, Eric. If you want to be a fan of perpetually playing Florida Atlantic, we're not your guys.
Yeah, go enjoy those games in Boca and that dump. What is it, 10,000 over there? You'll enjoy that. All right. That's true, folks. Tell the audience where they can find you, and I'm sure people will argue with you after listening to this segment.
Oh, yeah. Bring it on. You can catch me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew.
All right. Thanks, Drew. When we come back, Bryson Turner will join us. We'll talk about the Major League Baseball draft that took place this week. 3 nights were drafted, and what does that mean for UCF in 2022? Plus, later, we'll take your questions not related to this UCF-Florida deal. Sorry. Back with more. Here, you're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
And welcome back to this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Of course, this past week was the Major League Baseball draft, and 3 UCF players were drafted. Colton Gordon, perhaps the surprise to many, drafted in the 8th round. Of course, you had Josh Crouch and Jack St. Clair drafted 3 Knights players in the draft. Joining us now to discuss it is Black and Gold Banneret, our very own Bryson Turner, who's written about it. You could read it right now on blackandgoldbanneret.com. And Bryson, let's start with kind of surprising a little bit. Were you surprised? Kind of give us your thoughts on this draft and how it fared for UCF with 3 guys getting taken, including Gordon.
I think that of the UCF players that were eligible to get drafted, I was not surprised that it was these 3 to get drafted. Colton Gordon, even injured, he still is a major talent on the mound. And even though he would probably have to take a discount money-wise because he still has to rehab his elbow, I think that, it'd be a no-brainer for a team to not at least take a shot at him. Beyond that, the other 2 players that were drafted were Josh Crouch and Jack St. Clair. And I think both of those guys definitely had paid their dues in getting their MLB scouts to pay attention to them. Josh Crouch in particular had an amazing breakout year last season. And so I'm glad that the MLB team took notice of that and is drafting him, hoping to develop him even more after just this 1 year of just absolute amazingness out of him. And then we have Jack St. Clair, who his final stretch in 2021 after Colton Gordon got hurt was absolutely amazing. Like he really stepped up when the starting rotation needed him. I did some calculations, and basically before Colton Gordon tore his UCL, which is why he needed the Tommy John surgery, St. Clair was 1-4 and pitching a 5.97 ERA at the time. In his final 6 games of the season, after Colton Gordon got hurt, St. Clair went 4-1, and in that stretch pitched a 3.45 ERA, pretty much as good as anyone has been on the mound. So that stretch at the end, I think, can really showcase what Jack St. Clair is really capable of. And I think him getting drafted in like one of those later rounds, 16, is definitely a worthy spot for him to go. There are some other players that were entered in the draft that I do think maybe could have been drafted had the number of rounds been at 40 and not 20, because that was a recent change that was made to the draft. And we'll see if maybe that might lead to some of those Knights maybe possibly leaving for undrafted free agency, though again, that's a decision that is entirely up to them, and I can't really say if they'll go or not. And I am going to for future segments going to be under the presumption that anyone not drafted in the draft is staying. So yeah. I just want to make sure I make that clear. But I do want, that for the purposes of our later discussions, that's what we're going to do. But I want to make sure I'm completely transparent in saying that undrafted free agency is a thing, and with the halving of the number of the rounds, that means less players getting drafted. So we could see some players in undrafted free agency. And I just wanted to make sure that that's a possibility that's out there. But for the purposes of later discussion, we're going to assume that if you're drafted in the MLB draft, you're probably going to leave. And if you're not drafted, you're staying.
Very good. All right. The Gordon thing may have caught a lot of people off guard, but one person that wasn't caught off guard, Bryson, was Greg Lovelady, right? He told you in the media after the USF game in the American Conference Championship game that he actually thought, despite the injury to Colton, that he would get drafted, right?
Yes, he did. I'm glad that he took the time to talk about Colton. He had been out for a while at that point, but he basically took the opportunity in that press conference to talk about each player that was probably entered in the MLB draft. And when he brought up Gordon, he said that he was that without the Tommy John, so pre-injury, Gordon was a 6-round material, like a top 6 round material. But even with the Tommy John surgery, he still thought a team would definitely take a chance on him, especially if it was at a discount, because it's like it's a low risk, high reward type of play. And I would say that Lovelady had a really accurate representation of that.
Let's get into now what this means for the team in 2022 here, Bryson. Now, the Gordon thing is unique because I think we all knew he was probably going to be out next year anyway. So I think you would have going to plan ahead without him in 22. But for those that haven't followed baseball on a daily basis, what do you expect to see? And obviously, there's let's let everybody know. Additions could be made between now and the fall. Subtractions could be made, between now and the fall. But we're just basing this on what we know today as we record this in mid of July. So that's what we're basing this on, because obviously there's the transfer portal, and obviously, but by the time, what do you expect to see as far as some of the names to look for as far as pitching in 2022?
All right, so if we're going to look at pitching, we have the big thing is that we already know we lost Colton Gordon, and then we have Jackson, and then we're losing Jack Sinclair to the Washington Nationals. So if anyone wants to keep an eye on Jack Sinclair's journey to the show, he'll be in the Washington Nationals organization. So, but as far as we're concerned at the pitcher's mound, the biggest concern that I have is starters. That is what our Achilles heel was last season, and it's going to be have to be improved a lot if we're going to have be a factor in the American Athletic Conference. Heck, USF managed to get pretty deep in the postseason because of how stalwart a starting pitching unit they had, like I had pointed out. So I think that us making sure that we have a solid starting rotation is going to be important, and losing guys like Colton from injury, which we already had some time to come to peace with, but now losing Jack Sinclair, now that's going to definitely be a pretty big blow. We also lost AJ Jones, although considering how his play was, it is what it is. So let's go ahead and just look through what we have right now. So right now, the only starting pitcher that we probably know is going to be there for sure is Hunter Patterson. So Patterson started the season in the rotation, had some issues, went to the mound, went to the bullpen, worked himself back up, and then once Colton Gordon was out for a little bit, I think he was maybe out for one or two series before Hunter Patterson was put back into the rotation right away, back into the rotation. But once he did, he was completely lights out. Lovelady talked about how he was showcasing the potential that he showed in fall ball, and it looks like we may already pretty much have our prime candidate for who's going to take over our I guess de facto ace for that hole that Colton Gordon left. So Patterson, I think, is a pretty definite lock. So that's one. And now, how many starters do we want to talk about? Do we want to have 3, 4?
No, just give me some names. Just names we got to look at. As you mentioned, we lose St. Clair. We're going to lose, obviously, Colton Gordon as of now. Hunter, you're right. I think that is significant. Some people wondered, would he get drafted and so forth? What's his future like? He's the guy, right? It's going to have to, if he's going to lead this rotation. Who else could be in arms? It could be the answer, perhaps. We'll see. Maybe they're trying to address that via the transfer portal too.
That is certainly something. Now, one thing that I think we want to take a look at is Kenny Serwa. So I think Kenny Serwa could very easily be back in the rotation. He definitely did not have the best season last season. He had a 5.81 ERA, 3-5. So not the best starter out there, but he did start all of last season. He has the experience. Maybe he just had a bad year. I mean, I remember watching him in the final series, and he had pitched a pretty good game. So I have faith in him. And I remember that in that final series on Senior Day, they were originally going to honor Kenny Serwa in the Senior Day festivities alongside Jordan Rathbone and AJ Jones, but they pulled him out at the 11th hour, basically. And I talked to Baseball SID Colin Yeager about this, And he told me that it was because Serwa was finally given another year of eligibility. And so the fact that they pulled him out of the senior day festivities and he got another year of eligibility already made me think that he was going to be coming back if he wasn't drafted. And so now that we saw that he wasn't drafted, he's probably definitely going to be coming back. So I would say Kenny Serwa is going to be in the starting rotation alongside Hunter Patterson. Then after that, things get a little bit murky. So looking at the other players that started on the mound this season, you have first off, you have Zach Hunsaker. Hunsaker started 5 times last season. His full season ERA was 3.38, and he went 2-3. So, and I would definitely want to commend Hunsaker for coming in, because he was managed to basically be a good stopgap when Colton Gordon got hurt and the rotation was kind of like didn't really know where to go. If Sinclair was able to fill the hole of like the lead pitcher right after Colton Gordon got hurt, like in that intervening time between when Colton Gordon got hurt and Hunter Patterson came back into the rotation, in that intervening time, Sinclair led the rotation and then Hunsaker gave it another arm. And Hunsaker did a pretty good job with it too. Not the best. He's still pretty young, but he did get some pretty good experience there. And I think Greg Lovelady could easily see that and put him in the starting rotation alongside Patterson and Serwa. Another pitcher that got the only other pitcher that got a start last year, besides all the names that we have mentioned before, Jones, Sinclair, Patterson, Gordon, all that, is Ryan Saltonstall. He started one time, and he at one time finished with a 7.43 ERA. Now, I can actually give a definitive answer with this one. If you look on the Black and Gold Banneret, I did a story about profiling Jordan Rathbone and his baseball career, particularly his final season at UCF, where he lit up the bat. Just amazing performance out of him. And I talked to Ryan Saltonstall on that story because he and Rathbone were both teammates from community college. So they both came to UCF together from South Mountain Community College in Arizona. And I can definitively say, after talking to both of them, that Ryan Saltonstall is actually done. He's going to be out next year. He has an injury. If I recall correctly, I believe it's a torn labrum. And so as far as being on the field, he is not going to be back next year. So that means that basically it's an open competition. If we want to look at things right now, I think the top 3 that we know, if we want to look at the people we have right now, the most obvious 3 are Patterson, Serwa, and Hunsaker. Now, if I want to throw my hat in the ring about a relief pitcher that maybe could make the jump to the starting rotation, because now obviously we could go to the transfer portal if we wanted to either improve our starting or maybe add a 4th one if we wanted to. But if I'm looking at a relief pitcher that could easily transition to being a starter, I would say Ben Vespi. I think Vespi would be a really good choice to make the leap from the bullpen to the starting rotation. He's made several fairly extended relief appearances last season. If I recall correctly, he went 5 innings in the East Carolina game. At one of the East Carolina games, he went 4 innings against Tulane, 4 innings in a game against Wichita State on May 9th. So he certainly can be stretched out over a longer period. Now, obviously, he would probably need to be trained to do that much more consistently. But it's certainly something that he has over some of the other relief pitchers out there. So if I had to say if there's one relief pitcher that could make the jump to the starting rotation, I would keep my eye on Ben Vespi for that. So as far as the people that we have now, my confidence order would be Patterson, Serwa, Hunsaker, Vespi.
All right. Now, Josh Crouch, big bat, behind the plate, and as well as obviously could play first base. That's going to be big production that they're going to have to try to offset. What do you see there as the possibilities there for UCF now to replace Crouch?
Well, there are two catchers already that the Knights have on the roster. You have Matthew Melendez, and then you have Ben McCabe. Now, if watching baseball from last season, Ben McCabe spent a lot of time at first base, but he does play catcher too. And I think that it's going to be interesting to see if Lovelady decides to keep him at first base, or if he's going to go back to catcher. Now, I would say that I have this little depth chart that I made just to kind of give me some visuals on this. And I think Ben McCabe probably should go back to catcher, I think, because we have Nick Romano to talk about. And Nick Romano, the roster even lists him as a first baseman. So if I wanted to give Nick Romano some time on the field and he's a first baseman, then I would probably move McCabe to catcher, so that way we can still have a pretty stalwart bat there. McCabe hit a good amount of dingers last season too, just like Crouch, and then Nick Romano would go play at first. Romano did had a very resurgent late season appearances in the American Athletic Conference tournament. So I think that for anyone worried, having watched majority of last season and Romano not really living up to some of the potential he might have had based on the 2020 season, I think you should be fine, because it's not there anymore, because Romano's still able to do it in the batter's box. But as far as pitching as far as fielding is concerned, I think we could see Nick Romano play first base.
Romano really kind of turned it around at the end there of the year. So we'll see what happens. Of course, still a long ways to go, as we're just still in July and so many questions. And before you know it, though, we'll get some answers once we report the fall ball. Which we didn't have last year. Remember, we didn't have a fall ball. Hopefully, we'll be on track to have a fall ball, and we can all see the fall ball in person.
Yes, one answer actually that I'm going to be very much looking forward to. We talked about before that we pretty much know that we're going to lose five players. We have our three draftees, which are Colton Gordon to the Astros, Josh Crouch to the Detroit Tigers, and Jackson Clare to the Washington Nationals. And then you have the two players we lost from not having any more college eligibility because they were seniors, A.J. Jones and Jordan Rathbone. We talked about A.J. Jones earlier when we talked about the pitching staff, but I do want to take some time to talk about the outfield gap left by Jordan Rathbone. I talked to him a few times for the profile I did on him, and the topic came up of who is going to come up in the outfield with him gone. So we have Pablo. So the big one, Pablo Ruiz. He started in the left field a lot last season. I would fully expect him back there again this time. Did a great job. Young guy. I think we will definitely see him there. Center field, Jeffrey Pena didn't get drafted, so likely coming back, I imagine, and so I would imagine him being back in center field. Did a great job there. Speedy guy, definitely UCF's resident speedster. But then it comes down to right field. Who is going to replace Jordan Rathbone? Because Rathbone played every single game in the pandemic shortened 2020 season and the full 2021 season. So we really didn't have a chance to see who could replace him out there. When I talked to Rathbone, I asked him, hey, what kind of players out there do you think can take over right field from you? And he gave me 4 names. One is actually Pablo Ruiz. So he thinks that Pablo Ruiz could maybe make the transition from left field to right field. So that's certainly a possibility. But he's been playing left field for a while. I want to go ahead and just assume that he's going to just stay there because we want to bring up some new names, And it could easily be the case that this new name could take over left field and Pablo Ruiz could go to right field. Who knows? But the three new names that he brought into this conversation. First up, I want to bring up one that probably will be familiar to some UCF fans already, Trent Taylor. So Trent Taylor made several appearances last season. He played in 33 games. He only started in 7, so he wasn't around all that much. But he's also a speedster, if I recall correctly. He did some pinch running. And I think that having another speedster out there would certainly benefit. Jeffrey Payne, you can't do all the base stealing around here. So I think that if Lovelady wants to keep Trent Taylor's development going further, then that can certainly be a great. Then him taking over right field or left field, depending on where Ruiz goes, would certainly be a good choice. If we want to go the young guy route, we want to keep Trent Taylor as kind of a utility option. Rathbone mentioned Colin Flynn. Now, Colin Flynn was a freshman coming in. He's from Coral Springs. Didn't really get to play all that much last season. Looking at his statistics, I believe he didn't really play.
Yeah, didn't play a lot, but that's where part of the development there. You got to kind of move forward there. So
that's a possibility. Yeah. And then one name that I think really intrigued me when he said it, when he said this one, something in my mind went, really? And that is Tom Jostin. Now, I know what some of y'all are probably thinking that follow the baseball team, like Jostin. Didn't he play like DH and second baseman and maybe third base once in a while? Why would he be in right field? So Jostin, obviously, from seeing Jostin play multiple positions, he's definitely a Swiss Army knife kind of guy. So I wouldn't be shocked if they would give him the ability to play right field. But another wrinkle that maybe might lend credence to this theory is that Jostin's bat is one of the more understated ones in the UCF lineup. Jostin has a 253 batting average, hit 8 home runs, but it certainly were some pretty clutch at bats from the American Athletic Conference tournament and all that. So that's a bat you really do want to keep in the game. However, the thing is that there's a second baseman on the team, because Jostin played second base a lot, is John Montez. And Montez last season hit a 275 batting average. So that's certainly a bat you want to keep in the game as well. So that means we have 2 second basemen. Obviously, only one can play the position. So why go ahead and just have Montez play, because Montez is much more of a specialized second baseman. That's really the only place we've really seen him play. So we put Montez there, and then we take Jostin and put him out in right field. And so I think that's certainly a good possibility. Now, of course, there also is the designated hitter position. Jostin spent a lot of time as a designated hitter last year, so that could certainly be a possibility where Jostin could, instead of playing right field, Jostin could just be the team's resident DH. Right. But the fact that Rathbone named him as a possible replacement for him is certainly an interesting little nugget into this conversation. So out of all these names, if I had to say what I feel like the most likely thing is going to happen, I think it's going to be Trent Taylor. I would be interested if it were Jostin. It'd be interesting if it were Jostin. But I think if I were a betting man, the odds are I think it's going to be Trent Taylor, unless Colin Flynn just goes off in fall ball or something.
Well, and that's the beauty of fall ball, is you get to experiment with some things. So some guys might play positions they haven't played before, and maybe you see how that goes and things like that. Plus, we're not even including the incoming class that's coming in. So should be fun. Should be fun in the fall. Make sure everybody check out Bryson's recap of the draft, Colton Gordon getting drafted, and the 3 guys getting drafted with St. Clair and Crouch on blackandgoldbanneret.com right now. Right now. Read it. Pass it on to your friends. Spread the word. Because Bryson worked like late hours on this. And that's, it's a lot of work. Now, we've talked a lot about Crouch, UCF losing their main catcher, UCF softball losing their starting catcher via the transfer portal. Those are one of the questions that's in a Q&A section, which we'll address next. You're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Eric Lopez alongside Bryson Turner. All right, we're going to take now some of our listeners' questions. We did this last week. We'll try to do this especially throughout, moving forward throughout the summer. Make sure you can always ask questions throughout the week at our Twitter handle as well as our Facebook page as well. And Bryson, you're going to read off some of the questions. What are some of the questions we got?
All right, let's go ahead and take one that you mentioned this right before we went to break. So I think it's a pretty good first question for us to start off with. We have one from @UCFGuy23. Why did UCF softball player transfer? Overpopulation her position, Carissa or Nellis?
That's been a very popular question in the last 24 hours because I've been bombarded with that question. And let me just first say, I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, that people are surprised. Like it's Oregon in the Pac-12. Pac-12 in softball is like the holy grail. Now, Carissa is a California kid. They all grow up to play in the Pac-12 at some point. And I can tell you this, Bryson, there are currently 640 players in the transfer portal in softball since May 10th when the regular season ended. Everybody is basically about 3/4 of the sport is losing some departures via the transfer for various reasons. Number one, you have this roster adjustment. Remember, this past year's rosters were expanded. You had the extra year of eligibility. Well, now you got to get back to your normal numbers. You're not going to be able to keep everybody. That's part of it. But then when you have a good player, the marquee programs kind of quietly like to, hey, if you're, through different people in their voices, different people, travel ball coaches and things like that. Hey, if you're interested in entering, playing here, you could enter the portal and end up going to a bigger program. And I think that's going on a lot in softball. Because remember, Bryson, softball doesn't have a pro league that really is worth, playing a long time. Like, in college baseball, even though there's the transfer portal, you're going to see some movement. A lot of movement will not happen because guys will just go pro and be eligible for the Major League Baseball draft. There's that goal. If you're a basketball player, your goal is the NBA draft. If you're football, it's the NFL draft. That is not the case in a sport like softball or volleyball. And so as a result, if you're good in a case like Carissa, you're going to draw some eyeballs, and you go to a Pac-12 school like Oregon, it makes a ton of sense. I don't think it's a negative. It means there's something wrong with the program. I mean, some people have brought up other transfers. Brianna Vasquez going to Iowa. That's a case there where she reunites with Renee Gillespie, who recruited her to come to UCF in the first place. The other players that are transferring basically were up, had 1 year extra year. They weren't playing here. They want to seek playing time. And in some cases, they're the grad transfer. They want to seek out a degree that they probably can't get at UCF. So my point is there's a lot of different reasons for it. But the main thing as far as the Carissa one, since that's the headliner, is, yeah, she's going to a Pac-12 school. Every kid basically does that. Do you have a follow-up on that, Bryce?
All right. As somebody who grew up on football, the fact that the Pac-12 is good at something makes me kind of shocked.
Oh, there you go. Well, they are the premier softball. And let me just say, from a UCF standpoint, they have Juliana Wilson, who could play catcher. They have a freshman coming in, and Ashley Griffin, who I think they're very high on. Jada Cody, you remember Bryson? Jada Cody played some catching at the end of the year and actually caught Gianna Mancha, who's right now going to be the projected ace. They had great chemistry. In fact, Gianna's stats were better with Cody than any other catcher on the staff. So don't be surprised if you see Cody catch a little bit more behind the plate for next year. But they also have Juliana Wilson, and they have the freshman Griffin, who they like a lot. So they got 3 catchers there. They're going to be fine from that standpoint. But look, this is the new world now in college athletics. Get used to it. You're going to see additions and subtractions, and you're going to lose players to bigger programs. That's just the way it is, especially in softball, where leagues like the SEC and the Pac-12 get more exposure, get more coverage from other media outlets that cover softball. That's an issue. I'm not a fan of it, but that's the way it is, and it ain't changing anytime soon. And when you have good players, you could be suspect to this. So UCF's not alone to this. UCF's made their own additions as well from that standpoint. So that's what I would look at the catching position. We addressed the pitching situation on last week's episode, so you could I addressed some of that as well. But they're going to still have their core of Shannon Doherty, Jada Cody, Kennedy Searcy, who missed the second half of the year with an injury. She should be back. That's going to be their core on offense. Losing Ornelas hurts, but they have depth there at the catching position. So I hope to write about this more in the next week or two. Once things are finalized, I'll go on a much more deeper look on the softball roster for 2022. Kind of like baseball, Bryson. They're going to have some questions, but there's still a core that both baseball and softball will have. Something we forgot to mention in the previous segment. The baseball team still has a core, especially on the left side of that infield, that I know you're excited about with Alex Freeland. It's worth mentioning. We didn't mention that in the last segment. You brought it up to my attention. People always focus on who they lose. And that bullpen, right. But people always focus on what you lost and what you don't have. And I think people kind of need to remember that. So sky's not falling, is my point. All right, next question.
Very well said. Very well said. Speaking of being very well said, let's go ahead and do this question from @Corey_PhD. If you could change any rule in any college sport, what would it be? And in parentheses, he commented, this one is for Eric Lopez, as he usually gets on a soapbox.
Well, I'm not going to dismiss you out of that. Do you want to get on a soapbox? Is there something that you like to be changed there, Bryson?
Honestly, if you had asked me that question like a few months ago, it would have been name, image, and likeness rights, but that's kind of been addressed now at this point. And so as of this moment, nothing really comes to mind right away.
Okay.
So for me, because the one I would have said has kind of been addressed already.
I would say I'm assuming.
I'm interested to see what you have to say on that.
I would say that I'm not going to address the whole transfer stuff because it's not going to change. It's kind of out there. I don't know if there were specifics that they was looking for. Sorry, repeat the question again.
Question was, if you could change any rule in any college sport, what would it be?
Oh, see, changing a rule. That's different. Like I've been prominent adding replay for softball in the postseason, but I'm gonna say change the rule. I know you're not gonna like this, Bryson, and Jeff hates this that I say this, but I'm gonna bring it up. I would change the overtime rule in college football. I hate it. It's a gimmick. It's a fluke. It comes down to red zone offense. I would change it to where each team gets a possession, but you actually, have to get some first downs and earn some points. I feel like it turns into a shootout, kind of like soccer. We saw this with the Euro Championships decided by penalty kicks. I hate that. I wish it was decided more. And I'm not saying, if you want to move it back to like the 50-yard line, 40-yard line, make them earn it. That's all I'm saying. Otherwise, just play overtime. Each team gets a possession and then sudden death. But, I know you disagree because you love the overtime.
I mean, I love the overtime more than the NFL overtime. That's really the only reason that I do. But I do understand your point, though, because, especially with the fact that, that kickers are able to kick longer distances nowadays. I think putting the ball just moving the ball back, like, I really don't think that's that big of a change to make, honestly. Like, For me, I love college overtime in terms of its structure because it allows the teams to at least, have a chance to strike back at each other. Because in NFL overtime, and as someone who comes from a family of Atlanta Falcons fans, it just crushed me in the overtime of the Super Bowl where the Atlanta, lost the coin toss, didn't get the ball, Patriots score. That's it. No, you can't go. Atlanta can't get on offense and try to answer. That's it. Game over. So.
Well, some would say. That's where your defense needs to step in and stop them from scoring a touchdown.
No, it's true. It's true. No, it's true. That's true. Yeah, but and that's true, and I get that, and I think there is certain credence to that. But the way that college football does it, where basically both teams just go at each other, and whoever manages to prevail prevails. And where both teams get a shot at it at least. Then I think that that's a really good structure. And what you're proposing really isn't changing the structure. It's just changing the position of the ball and how difficult it is. I agree with because I think that that making it harder for the kickers would really be the key here. Because if you put the ball at the 20, 25 yard line, you can probably bet that the kickers even if they don't move the ball at all, you still have the kicker there.
Well, it puts more strategy into it. Let's say you put the ball back, it's like the opponent, on the other, you have to go 70 yards, let's say. You face a fourth down, there's urgency there. Do you go for it? Do you kick it away? Do you trust your defense? Field position? I think it brings back a lot of the elements that we're used to seeing in football. What I hate about the current system is it eliminates a lot of that. It's just, hey, let's just play a red zone offense. And now they've adjusted the rule where I think it's starting in the third overtime, you're going to go for 2 points. So now you're going to be deciding games based on a 2-point play? I think that's atrocity. So I hate it. I agree with you, by the way, for the record. I think both teams should get the ball. So I'm not saying that they shouldn't. All I'm saying is make them earn it. That's all. Because I hate these games that are 17-17 in regulation and then play 5,000 overtimes and end up being 62-55. I don't think that's a bad representation of what the game was. And it just turns gimmicky, and I hate gimmicks. That's just my thoughts. But anyway, so that's what I would change. There's my soapbox moment right there.
Yeah, no, I like that. I think it was really good because it doesn't really go after because it doesn't go after the structure. It just, adds a new wrinkle to it that makes it a little difficult. Now, I want to actually respond to the fourth down thing because I think that if we want to say if you place the ball at a certain yard lines, I think that I don't think punting would probably be allowed in that circumstance because why would you punt the ball if the ball was going to end up at say the 40-yard line again anyway? It could lead to it would basically be you have to have a fourth down. You would have to do a fourth down conversion because punting would really be unnecessary.
Well, it depends on how you would set up the overtime. I would play straight up. In other words, and that's a valid point. If you don't have punting, then yeah, you probably have to go for it, which would make it exciting. So I'm okay with that. All but right. you could do that, or if you want to include kickoffs and punting in that scenario, you could include that in part of the strategy. I'm open to different ideas. I'm not saying it has to be, hey, kickoff and kickoff overtime. I just hate what it is currently. I think it's a joke, and I don't take it seriously. I'm sorry, I don't. So anyway.
Now, listening to what you were saying before, actually brought up a circumstance that I didn't really think of as a rule before, but considering that you brought it up in your discussion, I want to bring it up from my end as well. So if I did have one rule that I want to change or at least adjust is the instant replay, who has instant replay in the American Athletic Conference with baseball. Because if you remember back in the Wichita State series, I believe it was, Lovelady had basically had at it with umpires over some calls and ended up getting ejected from the game. So, and part of that comes from the fact that, John Juliano Park is not outfitted with replay capabilities, while some other American athletic facilities, such as I believe East Carolina, is. So I would say that I don't know if this would technically be changing a rule as much as adding a rule,
right?
But I think that ensuring that instant replay is either consistently available or not available. If you want to be unpopular with people, go ahead and do that. But as long as it's fair, make sure that it's consistent across the entire American Athletic Conference. Because if a call can be reviewed at East Carolina's facility while UCF cannot, and it's like, a big play doesn't choose what stadium it's in. So, if you have a play where you need to look back on it again, then instant replay should be available to you, and no matter where, if your stadium is able to support it. And I would imagine, the American Athletic Conference would be able to support it. I mean, they're a Division I college football program. I feel like that'd be something they'd be able to support. So I think that would be my rule. I just didn't think about it as changing as much as it is just adding a rule, but in making sure instant replay is consistent across the American Athletic Conference baseball scene, that would be what I would do.
Softball, by the way, they just passed where they're going to probably do the same thing, and it's going to be up to each conference, and it's going to be interesting how the softball decides to do that, because I've heard the softball has the same problem that baseball does in that some of the stadiums can do replay, some cannot. I believe softball can at UCF, whereas I know for a fact Wichita cannot, Memphis cannot. So we're going to run into that same issue. So I'm very interested how the league will handle that. That's a good point on your part. All right, what's the next question?
All right. So let's see. Let's go ahead and do an Corey Esquire PhD submitted a couple more questions. So let's go ahead and get to one of those. Let's see. Let's go with this one. Who is the most underappreciated former Knights athlete across any sport? Now, I do want to tee up this one thing because at @Delgado_Ox did have a response to that question that I think would be interesting for us to kind of react to. He said Phil Dalhausser.
I mean, that's so tricky, right? And we're going to get into more about Phil Dalhausser next week because obviously next week's Olympic week. So we're going to dive into more of the current of UCF alums that will be part of the Olympics. Look for coverage of that on blackandgoldbanneret.com. Bryson is kind of working on that for next week. But he was not an athlete here. So because it's kind of an interesting deal. But that's not a bad guess. I think the most underappreciated. What would you define the most underappreciated? What is it underappreciated by UCF fans? Is it just in general? I think that's the question that certainly brings up. You were very passionate about this question. You were intrigued by this. What do you have in mind?
So I would say for me, I'm a big football guy, so I'm probably going to have a lot of thoughts on with in terms of that. But I would say a very underappreciated Knights athlete, I think would be it would be Cole Schneider. And if only because he's up there on so many statistical lists of some of the highest marks in UCF history.
Oh, you're talking about Ryan Schneider.
Oh, Ryan Schneider.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, like Cole Schneider, the offensive lineman. I was like, wait a minute.
No,
Ryan.
Oh man, I was thinking of him. That's my.
There you go.
No wonder that name. My bad.
He's underappreciated too. That's a fair.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't think
we can talk about offensive lines all day.
Yeah.
No, Ryan Schneider, the quarterback. Yeah, my bad. That is my bad. I was thinking about this year's team, then Schneider, being a last name, that obviously is not exactly, unique to one people.
Well,
so
the Ryan Schneider. Let me bring up Ryan.
Schneider has some high statistical value, and so. Yeah, I just think that, I wouldn't say it's not like I would put him on the level of Dante Culpepper, Mackenzie Milton, Blake Bortles, that kind of stuff. It's not like that. But I mean, if you have have such high statistical marks, I would have felt like that we hear a little bit more about him as one of the pretty good UCF quarterbacks to have done the game, not on the level of Milton, Bortles, or Culpepper, but he at least maybe hear him mentioned every once in a while.
Well, part of the issue with Ryan, and he's turned his life. I mean, he's changed. He's a high school coach. He's done great stuff there. His departure did not end well. He was basically kicked off school. That's why his career abruptly ended in 2003 over some issues in class and things like that. So that's probably what kind of hurts him in his legacy a little bit unfairly, or not fair. I mean, I'm not saying it's fair or not fair. I'm just saying that's kind of why maybe he's not looked at and revered because of the way it ended. Plus, it was the independent era in UCF, so that's kind of an era that gets kind of lost. But it's a good train. Underappreciated. I mean, boy, let me ask you this, Bryson, because I think you're a perfect person to ask this. How aware are you about Michelle Akers and the fact that she played here at UCF? And it's weird to say because everybody knows who Michelle Akers is, but yet I feel like she's still underappreciated because you don't see her recognized on campus per se, right? Like she's the greatest athlete in the history of UCF. She, by far, that's not a debate. With her accomplishments, she's one of the greatest women's soccer players of all time, if not. We had her on last year. I'm a huge fan. And yet, I still feel where she's underappreciated considering who she is. And I don't know what the answer is. I feel like she should, I would personally name the soccer and track and field after her. Like that field should be named after her, in my opinion. So that's one name that jumps to my mind from that standpoint. But I don't know if that qualifies under this category now. But what's your thoughts? Because you're one of the youngsters. How aware are you? Because I think you're a perfect test about how aware are you about Michelle Akers? Because I think that's something that a lot of the young UCF fan base and media, people that now are going to school at UCF, are not as aware of the previous athletes, pre-American Conference, maybe, if we go that far back. So I would say a lot of the athletes from the 2000s and 90s are very underappreciated because I think a lot of people think, for example, in the football program that they just showed up 5 years ago, but there's been a lot of success in history with the football program that goes beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the only UCF player that I could really think about, pre, roughly 2000, the roughly pre-2000s era when UCF really first kind of burst onto the scene was Dante Culpepper, and that's only because he had an NFL Hall of Fame level, career in the pros and the whole situation they have with the USFL. And everything like that. And so that's really the only UCF football player I really know from that far back. But yeah, I mean, I'll go ahead and just kind of date myself real quick so that way everyone kind of knows the situation. So I've looked up Michelle Akers, and that kind of shows you I don't really know who that is. Her college career at UCF was from 1985 to 1988.
Yep.
So to put that in perspective, my parents were not married yet when that happened. So as far as me being born, that's still a long way away from happening and when Michelle Akers was being in college football. And even her performances on the national team from 1985 to 2000, I was born in 2000. So Michelle Akers' appearances on the U.S. national team were already done by the time I was born. So yeah, I wouldn't really have been around to see that. I think another big factor is the fact that soccer. I don't think soccer was as big as it was back then as it is now, because soccer I think is starting to really gain a foothold in America now. I know that that's something that hasn't really been a thing in the past, but I think now is when things are finally starting to really take hold as far as professional soccer. We obviously have had the U.S. national team, which is great, but but obviously the Olympics are once every 4 years. The FIFA World Cup is once every 4 years. And so it's not like, the USA would get all soccer crazy all the time. It would just be once every 4 years because USA beat everybody else. You know what I mean? So And so that means it's not really a chance for, some soccer players to make an individual name for themselves all the time. Obviously, if you're on the national team, you could, but of course there's less opportunities to. And now with the MLS being a thing and really being pretty recent, their first season was in 1996. And even at 1996, and even then, as far as Orlando is concerned, like just if you want to look at
right.
Orlando,
Well, here you bring.
Orlando.
I'm glad you brought up the MLS and men's soccer, because the other athlete I would bring up is underappreciated is Winston DuBose, who is a UCF Athletic Hall of Famer, is a Florida Sports Hall of Famer, had a great career, helped build the beginning of the UCF men's soccer program, had a long illustrious pro career, playing in the what was the MLS version back in the day in the pro leagues, played for the Tampa Bay Rowdies. I got to give a shout out to our friend Trace Chalco, host of Sons of UCF Live. He covered and actually as a fan Winston DuBose, and he interviewed Winston DuBose a couple years ago. Did a fantastic one-on-one interview. I didn't know much about Winston DuBose, and I consider myself a UCF historian. And he brought up, since then, I had Winston DuBose on, we had him on this podcast about a year ago. If you followed my UCF 250 series from last year, I ranked Winston DuBose as the number 3 greatest UCF male athlete of all time. And I think it's rightfully so. And he's donated to the men's soccer program. He's another one that's underappreciated. He's one of the greats of all time. You could argue that Jim Rudy, a coach that helped start up the men's and the women's soccer program, is underappreciated as well. He's in the UCF Hall of Fame. It is worth noting the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame. One of the things that would help this, Bryson, is if the UCF Athletics Hall of Fame becomes more consistent and airs on a yearly basis. I think there's enough athletes so you can have a class every year or at least every other year. Now, some of that, I think they were planning on doing that from what I was told, but obviously COVID made some changes to that. I've been told from sources, don't be surprised, look for the UCF Athletic Hall of Fame to possibly be back this fall. So, which is different than what they've been doing recently, which is hold the Hall of Fame ceremony in the spring. Apparently they're going to move it to the fall. So I think that's going to help in a lot of this. But I think there's a lot of athletes, and it's not a one-person answer. And I know I'm cheating on the question, but to me, Akers, I still think is underappreciated, but I definitely think Winston DuBose is underappreciated on the men's soccer side. I think basketball, I'm not sure if you went with basketball. I think people are well aware of Bo Clark and Torchy Clark. I don't know if I think people still underappreciate Jermaine Taylor, who I think is pound for pound still the best basketball player in the history of UCF. Baseball, who's underappreciated? I don't know. I would say, is it Justin Pope, Jason Arnold, who I think were part of the best UCF baseball team ever in 2001? I think, are they underappreciated? I think that's fair. I think that with women's sports, you can argue a lot of them are always underappreciated. So anyway, I know I just copped out and gave you a bunch of answers, but it's a really good question. And I think there's a lot of people that are underappreciated, I guess, unfortunately. And hopefully the school will do a better job moving forward. And I think they are going to try to do this to honor the past. Mark Daniels recently did a great article. I don't know if you saw it, Bryson, on Dante Culpepper and how
I did read that.
Fantastic for Mark, who's obviously the voice of UCF and obviously know as well inside out. And I think it's a great point. And he wasn't saying that and he made a point about this on his radio show. He said there's no issues between Culpepper and UCF. Culpepper is one that just doesn't like to be in the limelight and things like that. But he's underappreciated, Bryson, big time in football, because there's a lot of people right in the last 5 years that think that Mackenzie Milton is the greatest quarterback and the greatest football player ever. And certainly he's in the conversation. But I watch Culpepper, like Dante Culpepper, Bryson. If it wasn't for Dante Culpepper, I'm not sure that I would be at UCF, because I never heard of UCF until I heard about this Dante Culpepper kid playing quarterback and being a future first rounder. I actually drove up with some buddies in 1998 on Halloween weekend to watch Dante Culpepper in his senior year play against Jim Tressel in Youngstown State. I think he's underappreciated. He put UCF football on the map. That was right when they just moved into the FBS level. So he's underappreciated. And Mark, and I encourage people, if you haven't read Mark's article about Dante. Hopefully we can see Dante back at a football game. We haven't seen him in a while.
Yeah, I would certainly love that too. I mean, I think one reason for that is because UCF has only just recently become a national brand. I think that's really a big deal because, like, you know, when you're still trying to work your way up to that point, it's you kind of have to, kind of split your attention of of honoring the past and trying to push forward into the future. And I think now that UCF has really like got a stranglehold in just the national attention market, and I don't think it's going to let go anytime soon. I think now you're finally able to go, hey, we've had these players before that were absolutely insane, like Dante Culpepper. I mean, for me, like I said, Culpepper was the only UCF athlete I ever knew of, pre my time. And that was only because of just how legendary he was in the NFL and the USFL. So I would absolutely love it if Dante and a few other UCF alumna would be able to come back, especially Culpepper, and really just people from the pre-2000s era that helped to get UCF to where it is now, because it didn't just start in the 21st century. It's been a pretty long time in the making. And as a current student, I would love to be able to learn about these guys, because because you think that you're rooting for like a kind of a underdog type team now, team now with UCF. Imagine doing that back before 2000, when UCF was thinking things like an independent or the MAC or that type of situation. Like, imagine being a UCF fan then. So, and I can't do that because again, born in 2000. So yeah, I would completely agree with that. Like Dante, it's weird to think like to equate Dante Culpepper with the word underappreciated. But if you really want, but I think that that using that definition and using that context of being underappreciated, then yeah, I would kind of agree that Dante Culpepper probably could fit that term depending on what you're talking about. And it really just kind of depends on the context. So yeah, I know we kind of bounced all around.
Yeah, but it's a very good topic.
Broad.
Yeah, no question. Let's get to the last couple more questions. I know we kind of we're kind of short on time, so let's go ahead and go through the next couple questions. We'll try to go quicker this time, but we'll see. What's next?
All right. We have another one from Corey Esquire _PhD. If you could watch two former UCF teams, any sport, face off, which teams would it be and who would win? Now, I'm going to go ahead and just take the assumption that a baseball team can't face a football team. I'm just going to go ahead and make that assumption.
Fair.
Make that assumption. So, but any sport, can work for this. Do you want to go ahead and take this one first?
Well, the popular answer, I would guess, would be the 13 Fiesta Bowl team against the 17 Peach Bowl team, right? That's the two best UCF football teams ever. Blake Bortles against Mackenzie Milton, Traquan. I don't know. Was that going to be your answer? I don't know if that was going to be your answer or not, but
that was definitely something that I was that I was definitely thinking about. Though I would say that, and let's go ahead and get a couple obvious answers out of the way, because I think there are definitely a few ones that we could do. The 2013 Fiesta, what I think would really be interesting, actually, if we had I want to go ahead and just toss this out there, so that, because with football we can kind of talk all day about this. I would propose a four-team playoff, an all-time playoff. 1, the 2013 Fiesta Bowl team. 2, the 2017 National Championship team. 3, I would say maybe the Dylan Gabriel's freshman year, one with Dylan Gabriel on it, because I would be very interested to see maybe a Dylan Gabriel face off Mackenzie Milton, because that's something we couldn't get to see. And so I think that a DG versus Mackenzie Milton led team.
Well, maybe this year, maybe we wait. I mean, that maybe
maybe wait a little, maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe. But they didn't say the greatest though. They didn't really say the greatest. They could just say any, like, if you could watch two former UCF teams, but I just want to bring up 14 playoff because it's football. There's a lot of teams that you choose from.
Well, be careful. If Jeff was here, he'd be campaigning for a 12-team playoff. So watch out.
And then the fourth slot I would put with I don't know which exact season it would be, but a Dante Culpepper led team.
All right, so this is what I would do if you put, that's a good, if you gave me the 14 playoff, 13, the 17 team, the 90. If you're gonna if we got to put a Culpepper team, 98, the senior year, they went 9-2, would have gone to a bowl game under this current system. Heck, they would have probably been a conference contender if they were in a conference back then. 98. And then the other team would probably be, you have to debate between the 07 team led by Kevin Smith that was the first ever Conference USA championship team versus a team like 2010 that was Jeff Gottfried that they won CUSA. I would think it's a debate between those two teams if you include the 98. Some people might rather just not include the 98 team, but I think that's your debate, is those 5 teams for 4 spots. And with respect to the teams like the 1990 team that made it to the playoffs in 1AA, and I don't want to even get into all that. But as far as, we'll just keep it as far as the FBS level, maybe I would say 98, 07, 2010, 2013, 2017. I think those are the teams you're at least going into for now. Now, if 2021 team has a great year, you get your wish. They might get included if they have a great year and win the league, get to New Year's 6. You might get your little Dylan Gabriel versus Mackenzie Milton. Who's to say we won't get that in real life anyway, huh? Florida. Oh!
That'd be fun. I would say that would be really
fun. That would create some buzz.
Now let's go ahead and just quickly get to the second part of that question of who would win. So I'll go ahead and give your team give your bracket the go. So it would be 13, 17, 98, and then the picking between 2007. If you had to pick one between 2007 and 2000, and I think you said 10. Which one would you rather do, Kevin Smith or Jeff Gottfried?
See, I think the 10 team was better, but Smith was such a dominant player. I would love to see, to go along with this question, I actually would love to see how Kevin Smith would have fared against some of the UCF teams right now, and how ball control, that would have been fun. And I would probably pick that, even though I think 10 is an overall better team. That was a great defense, that 2010 team. But I think to see Kevin Smith on the field, for example, the 07 team against the 98 Culpepper team, that would be kind of fun in one matchup.
The workhorse of Kevin Smith versus the running back stable of McCray, Thompson.
That's another one, right? The 17, such a different. Like, we'll never see another Kevin Smith again, where the guy carried the ball like 400 times. It's insane. I think 17 and 13 are the two best teams. I actually think that would be a fun game, because I think 13 would – I'm be curious how the line of scrimmage would play, because 13 was very much more physical team with guys like Storm Johnson and Stanback, and I think their offensive line was better. I think Blake was great. I would love to see that game. I kind of lean towards 17 only because I think Scott Frost would have outcoached the O'Leary staff.
But yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think I would agree with that. Another factor, I think, is also the defense, because we have the Griffin brothers at play in the 17.
Yeah, but I wouldn't shortchange the 13 defense. Terrence Plummer is a great linebacker, maybe the best linebacker in program history. Jacoby Glenn was on that secondary as well. They had talent too there, but I see what you're saying. I mean, that 17 with the Griffin boys, and then obviously, they had talent too up front with Pittman and Gerard and company. It would have been a great game. That's the game I would love to see. I think if they bring back NCAA video game now that we have NIL, I know somebody's going to recreate that game, right? Like, it's got to happen.
Yeah. I know 13. I know that a lot of viewers will probably be rolling their eyes and be like, 13, 17 is like such an obvious answer, but it's such an obvious answer for a reason, because the 2013 team, 2013 was a time where, UCF kind of tasted the national spotlight for the first time. We lost it pretty badly. And then we come back and you get the Calling Matrix national, first place in the Calling Matrix in 2017 with Mackenzie Milton. And just the idea of seeing these two UCF quarterback titans who were not that far off from each other face off together is definitely something that I think a lot of people would love to see. And then, of course, seeing the running back trio of Storm Johnson and William Stanback going up against a running back core of Greg McCray. I believe Taj McGowan was there too. Adrian
Killings,
Thompson, and then even then the wide receivers, Gabe Davis versus Traquan Smith. I mean, that is certainly a major one. And then you have the defense with Terrence Plummer versus the Griffin boys. I mean, even the kickers, if I remember correctly, Matthew Wright and Dylan Barnes, I believe, would be the two. If I think on that team.
Yeah.
If I recall correctly.
Pretty stacked team.
I think so. Yeah. Even with the 14 playoff, it would be. I think Eric and I are both in a bit of an agreement that 13 and 17 team will go into the championship game, and then after that, it's a bit of a toss up, maybe a lean towards the 17 team. But but that's as far as football. We wanted to get that out of the way real quick. Let's go ahead and just. Are there any other sports do you think maybe that could work for this?
I'll do it for fun. Track and field. Renaya Jones, right? All the buzz. Renaya Jones. What if we paired her up against Octavius Freeman? Against Uriel Scott, against some of the great track and field athletes from the past, from UCF, Jackie Coward, that would be kind of fun.
That's the question said UCF teams, but if we're going to talk individual athletes, then I think that could, seeing those, I think would certainly be good to see how Renaya Jones would fare against some of the UCF track and field titans from the past. Now, it would depend on what event you're talking about, though, because
correct. I agree.
Renaya Jones is an expert hurdler at the moment, but of course, still being a freshman, I will never stop just being gobsmacked at how good she is as a freshman. So she has a lot of time to improve not only as a hurdler but also as a sprinter. So Corey, ask us that question again in maybe like 3 years. And maybe we might go into how Renaya Jones could probably smoke all of them or something. I don't know.
Right. Who knows? What other questions we got? I know we got to address the football question.
That's let me see. I believe that's all the questions we have under the under. All
right. So let's address the last one here, football wise. Which UCF game are you looking forward to the most on the schedule this year? You have what jumps out to you?
All right, let's go ahead and look.
Because everybody's good. I mean, obviously you got the Boise game in the opener. You got the game at Cincinnati. You got the game at Louisville. Like, which one? One game is the one that you're really looking forward to the most.
Looking at the schedule, I mean, I don't want to go with something too obvious. I think there are certainly several candidates. Of course, you have the Boise State game. Seeing these two Group of 5 powerhouses going up against each other is going to be a great game. Excited to see that. Louisville. I don't know if this is the first time that we have faced Louisville since the 2013 game.
That's correct. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so seeing USCF going up against Louisville again for the first time since the Blake Bortles days and the days of the Cardiac Nights was really great. It would certainly be great. Cincinnati and Memphis, they're always giving us headaches, giving us nail biters over the years. Getting to go against we're gonna see another chapter in the rivalry that I'm just going to make up now between Desmond Ridler and Dylan Gabriel, two of the great AAC quarterbacks. So
you got to pick one. You're picking. We got to pick one. That was the question.
No, I agree. I'm picking those because they're certainly great options. However, I think I want to go ahead and pick an understated one, or at least understated in terms of maybe the matchup, because I think the significance of this game in terms of UCF football history is going to be a reason why this game sticks out to me. And that's because it's going to be this year's War on I-4 against USF. And the reason I say that is because this is the year where UCF can finally take the series lead for the first time ever. And I think I feel like that, people that have, followed this football rivalry, this football series for, since the beginning, USF had dominated it for so long. And now UCF has caught up. They're tied now. And this season can finally be the season where UCF finally takes the series lead. And I think I would, as a UCF student, as someone who's looked at this rivalry and appreciated that it got renewed back in 2013 when UCF joined the AAC, and now we have the opportunity to finally do it. And I think that, as far as if you want to look at it from a historical perspective, because I would, obviously those other games are great for their individual purposes, but I want to, pick a game that stands out for a completely different reason. And so
I appreciate that. I like the fact you're into the history there, because some people have wondered about if the young fan base considers South Florida rivalry, considering UCF's dominated that. But I like the answer there. I'm going to go, I guess, with the obvious, which is Cincinnati. I just love the contrast in that matchup. I think Luke Fickell is a great coach. I think you can make the argument now that you have the two best head coaches in the conference in that game. That was not the case the last couple of years. Cheap shot. And I think Luke and Gus, I think, is fascinating. Their style of defense. Can Dylan Gabriel get over the hump against that defense? Their style against UCF style. I think it's going to be a physical game. I think that's the marquee game. Could be the first of two meetings this year. They could play again in the American Conference Championship game as well. I like the Louisville one. You bring up a great point. The last time UCF Louisville played was that classic game on that Friday night, ironically in 2013. Maybe the biggest win in the O'Leary era when you think about it. They were down 28-7 to Teddy Bridgewater and company. They lose that game. They don't play in the Fiesta Bowl. But they won that because Louisville would have won the league. Louisville was the favorite. They come from behind. They win that game. They go on to win out and win the conference championship and play in the Fiesta Bowl. You don't beat Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl without that win with Louisville. That's a very underrated win. That's a significant win. And it's ironic here. 8 years later, they're going back to Louisville on a Friday night on ESPN. So I'm intrigued by that as well. And obviously Boise, everybody's always excited about the first game. So by the way, and that's just, Boise UCF's an intriguing matchup, but first games is what they are. We don't know how good Boise is. We don't know how good we are, things like that. So I don't like when people, of course you're excited. You're looking forward to the first game. Everybody always looks forward to the first game.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I think that one could probably pick that matchup, like I said before, was because of the fact that, UCF and Boise State have been a part of the same conversations with the playoff committee. Like, a lot of UCF fans would point to Boise State in the BCS era being, having the flashes of brilliance that they've had. I know I go and watch replays of the Statue of Liberty play all the time on YouTube. But, so seeing these two group of 5 powerhouses going up against each other, just in terms of their, the histories of their programs, is certainly a very intriguing one, because, people have been talking about UCF and Boise State in the same sentence for a few years now. And now they're going to have a home and home series together, starting with this game. So.
All right. So there's a lot of options. We've done like we've done with every question. We've given you multiple answers. We've probably cheated on this, but that's okay. That's okay. All right, Bryson, this is a wrap for you. Tell the audience where they can find you and what you got, what you're working on.
All right. I am, you can follow me on Twitter at it's Bryson Turner. The B and the T in my last name are capitalized. And as far as what I'm going to be doing next, barring any breaking news, depending on what's going on with baseball and whatnot, I am currently working to get ready for Olympics coverage. I am very excited to see what some of our UCF alumni are going to do. For example, we got word recently that Alain Reyes is going to be not an alternate, but actually on the main team for Team Brazil.
Good.
in the Olympics, in the women's Olympic soccer tournament. So that starts on July 21st, so exactly a week from now. So we could be seeing Alain Reyes doing a few things there. Phil Dalhouser, of course, will be doing the beach volleyball tournament, so we'll be following that. And just a couple of other, UCF Olympians and one Paralympian as well that we'll be following over the course of the next month. So very excited to be doing that. I got Olympic, getting some Olympic fever after Renaya Jones's very valiant attempt to make Team USA. I'm sure we'll probably see her do that and try that again in 3 years. Probably maybe have some much bigger success there. But for now, we have some great UCF alumni that'll be in Tokyo. And I'm excited to see what they'll do and maybe go into them in depth next week. So that's gonna be fun.
All right, Bryson, thanks again. We got more questions. We'll kind of address them in future episodes. I know Roxanne has a question for us about the men's and the women's soccer team and the new players coming in. We'll address that in a future episodes, but a lot on this show on the plate as well. I was going to get into the whole, I'm not 100% sure how many of all these games we've talked about, by the way, on the schedule we're going to get in. The Big 12 Media Days was this week. The American Conference Media Day will be August 4th, and I think one of the big underlining topics are going to be what happens if a football team has some issues with COVID, if they're not vaccinated, and who's vaccinated and who's not. I think this is a storyline that's going to pick up in the next month or so, but we'll touch on that in the future episodes about that. For now, thanks to Andrew Glukoff for joining us earlier, as well as for Bryson Turner. I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.